Well, good morning, everyone. Hope you were here tuning in to our little icebreaker, but we were putting in chat where you're from, where you're tuning in from, and then what temperature it is right now. Just kind of seeing where everyone's at. But just wanted to say Happy New Year. My name is Elise Molleur. I'm a Brownfield Redevelopment Specialist with NJIT TAB. And on the topic of New Year, we're going to talk about Out with the Old, In with Renew, discussing utilizing brownfields for renewable energy. Today, I'm joined by Rebekah de la Mora, Senior Policy Analyst at North Carolina Clean Energy Technology Center, as well as Neil Alexander, Partner with Cuddy and Feder, LLP. Before we begin, I just want to say if there's one thing that I'm hoping you'll take away from this webinar, it's that brownfields and contaminated lands can be repurposed and redeveloped to include renewable energy. And there are a lot of resources that are available for those who are hoping to do just that. Just to go over the agenda, we're going to be discussing brownfields, a little bit of a refresher, or maybe kind of just understanding what they are first. And then Rebekah's going to speak about renewables in today's economy. I'm going to go into renewable energy on redeveloped brownfields, so tie those two topics together. And then Neil's going to discuss repurposing landfills and brownfields for solar energy. And we're going to end with, something nice and on a good note with rewarding redevelopments, a success story, and then the NJIT TAB program. So, what is a brownfield? Well, the US EPA defines brownfields as real property, the expansion, redevelopment, or reuse of which may be complicated by the presence or potential presence of a hazardous substance, pollutant, or contaminant. It's a mouthful of a definition. Some state environmental departments don't have their own definition of brownfields, and they refer to the EPA's definition. And then some states' definitions may differ slightly from the EPA's. For example, here in New Jersey, we like to do things differently, and the New Jersey Department of Environmental Protection specifies that brownfields are either industrial or commercial, so they exclude residential sites from being brownfields. Now, most people are familiar with the concept of brownfields, thinking old mills, factories, machinery shops, or manufacturing facilities. And operations performed at sites like these typically use large amounts of chemicals and petroleum products. There were spills during loading and unloading, drums were knocked over, substances seeped into the ground and the floor drains, and then waste products were ultimately dumped out the back door or buried on site. But brownfield sites are more than the old factories from the Industrial Revolution. They can also be former dry cleaners, old gas stations, vacant warehouses, landfills, and even abandoned houses. These types of facilities also typically stored or utilize hazardous substances. And houses can be brownfields too, based on the state's definition of a brownfield. Like I said, New Jersey actually excludes residential buildings. And if there are hazardous materials in the houses, such as asbestos, lead paint. So while the list of types of brownfields goes on, so do the types of brownfield contaminants. So we've narrowed down the list to 4 main common brownfield contaminants, and these include lead, asbestos, petroleum products, and volatile organic compounds, or VOCs. There's some sources listed here, but typically we see lead from lead-based paints or leaded gasoline, asbestos in insulation and roofing, petroleum from fuel tanks, heating tanks, VOCs from dry cleaning solvents, petroleum products, pesticides, and more. And the identification of these contaminants happens during the site assessment phase of a brownfield redevelopment project. And then they're cleaned up during the site remediation phase to an acceptable standard that it will protect human and environmental health. So while there is no set recipe, there is a generalized process for brownfield redevelopment projects. And here you see the different stages of brownfield redevelopment. So the most foundational stage we have here is planning. From there, your qualified environmental professional, or QEP, will walk you through the site assessment, investigation, and cleanup or remediation of the site. And then finally, we have site redevelopment. Things that need to happen at the beginning and throughout to nurture your redevelopment project include meaningful community engagement, identifying and planning for your funding sources, taking care of and building your partnerships, and then also revisiting your site reuse vision as the project evolves. And with a little background on brownfields and the redevelopment process, Rebekah de la Mora, Senior Policy Analyst at North Carolina Clean Energy Technology Center, is going to speak more.
Hi guys, as Lee said, my name is Rebekah Mora. I'm a senior policy analyst at the Clean Tech Center. So I'm going to be giving you guys pretty much an overview of what the renewable economy and landscape looks like across the US, just to give a sort of foundation when we actually talk about brownfields and solar and brownfields specifically. But first, I'm going to start off kind of explaining what the center is specifically. And so we are an extension center of North Carolina State University's College of Engineering. So we do public education and outreach related to clean energy. We have our hands in pretty much every pie you can think of. I'm on the policy team. We also do workforce development and training, clean transportation and fleet advisory services. Clean power and industrial efficiency is our engineering team. I have more in-depth information in the following slides that I'm not going to go through specifically. I just wanted it for you guys when you download them to have the information. But some quick notes of things we do. So again, I'm on the policy team. So we track legislation and regulation related to clean energy. We also run the database of state incentives for renewables and efficiency, aka Desire, which provides information on policies and programs related to clean energy across the US, not just North Carolina. And within that, we cover pretty much everything you can possibly think of. We've got net metering rules, community solar rules, renewable portfolio standards, solar access law, interconnection guidelines, and then pretty much any incentive that exists is probably in there. We're talking federal level, state level, local level, even utility specific programs. As an addendum to that, we also have Desire Insight. So Desire is free. It's free to use, but it's not free for us to update because we also have to pay our bills. So that's where Desire Insight comes in. And so Desire Insight is our subscription service that kind of looks at all of these changes as they're happening before it's actually official and can go into Desire. And so a lot of the information I'll be presenting in my presentation today is based on our 50 states reports and the maps that we put into those reports. And then, like I said before, we also do workforce development. So we have training courses on site related to mainly solar installations and operations. We also do a little bit of storage, and we're developing an EV charger program. Our transportation team does fleet advisory services for both public and private fleets, public education through ride and drive events. They also host the Sustainable Fleet Technology Conference, specifically related to fleet technology. And then our engineering team does technical assistance. So they do work through the Department of Energy's Technical Assistance Partnership for the Southeast. They also work with the USDA's REAP program, and they have a bunch of other things that I'm honestly forgetting at this moment. Now, on to the fun part of the actual policy maps. So as I said before, I'm going to give you guys kind of an overview of what the landscape looks like across the US. So first, we're going to start out with the largest contributing resource to each state's generation mix across the US. And so overall, you can see nationally, we have most states rely mainly on natural gas, followed by coal. Got some wind in the central area, some hydropower in the northwest and northeast, and then some nuclear energy in the east. And then I've picked out New Jersey and North Carolina just for a little bit of comparisons. You guys can kind of see that trail as it follows along. And so in New Jersey, natural gas makes up around 50% of the energy sources, while in North Carolina, it's around 40%. However, despite that disparity, when you look at the actual percentage of clean energy within each state, New Jersey and North Carolina are actually super close. They were both in 47% to the point that I actually had to look really hard at what the decimal was to see if there was actually a difference between them. And across the US, it's pretty varied. Some states are really low in clean energy. Some states are really high. Jersey and Carolina tend to fall a little bit in the middle of the pack. Breaking that down a little bit more, this is the actual state generation mix for each of the states. And so you can see, even though they had a very similar percentage of clean energy, the distribution and proportion of the types of energy is very different for each state. So New Jersey has a little bit more natural gas than North Carolina does, but it also has a lot more nuclear. A majority of New Jersey's clean energy comes specifically from nuclear, with only a little bit of renewables. North Carolina, on the other hand, has a little bit less natural gas, but it has a lot more coal, but also has a lot more renewables and less nuclear compared to New Jersey. So we have a lot of solar here in North Carolina. So it's interesting to see, despite that decimal percentage difference, the actual proportions are very different within each state. Next, we have the clean and renewable energy targets for the states across the US. So these are your renewable portfolio standards, clean energy standards, net zero targets, things like that. So around half of the states across the US have some form of a renewable or clean energy target. Any of states with an asterisk means they have a 100% target at some point in their timeline. For Jersey, North Carolina specifically, New Jersey's targets are more ambitious than North Carolina's. As you can see, New Jersey has a 50% goal of clean energy by 2030, while North Carolina is at 12.5% by 2021. So we did reach it, so yay us. And then for our 100% net zero goals, New Jersey also has a faster timeline at 2035 versus 2050. Now next, hold on, I'm having trouble with these arrows, I'm sorry. Okay. Next, I want to show you guys integrated resource planning requirements. And the reason I wanted to talk about this a bit was to kind of demonstrate how states are requiring or ordering utilities, or the major producers of energy, usually in a state, to actually decarbonize their electric generation. So integrated resource planning, for those who don't know, are usually 10, 15, 20, 30, 40-year plans that utilities have to file that kind of show step-by-step the types, amount, and timeline of new energy generation sources that they're going to implement. So states that have it and states that don't, it varies widely, and the actual timeline between plan updates also varies. So as you can see, New Jersey does not require utilities to file integrated resource plans, while North Carolina does for both of its investor-owned utilities. So Duke Energy and Dominion Energy both have to file an integrated resource plan every 2 years. So Dominion filed its most recent one in May of 2023, and Duke originally filed in August of 2023, and then it saw a massive change in its load growth projections and had to completely revise its integrated resource plan and refiled it in January 2024. And that's something we're actually seeing more and more often across the US, is utilities are filing these plans, and then they're getting hit with all of these unexpected load growth, so they have to revise the plans to actually facilitate all of that load growth. When it comes to what's actually in the plans themselves, this is a map showing the largest planned resource addition by technology type aggregated within the state for IRPs filed in 2023. So it's mainly renewables, which is nice to see. Uniquely, New Mexico was majority energy storage, and Montana was majority coal. In North Carolina, so Dominion and Duke both had solar as their highest addition. Dominion had over 19 gigawatts across the planning period, and Duke had over 17 gigawatts, and Duke actually increased it. So in the original August 2023 plan, it was 14 gigawatts. So they added an extra 3 gigawatts of just solar based on their load productions, and that's not even including all the increases they made for all of the other technologies. Now, getting a little more specific to things that you guys specifically might be interested in, since we're especially talking about solar, this is a map showing all of the net metering and distributed generation compensation across the US. It's a little hard to read, but mainly the dark blue is standard net metering rules. So both New Jersey and North Carolina have standard net metering rules. The green states are states that have shifted to usually a successor tariff. So it's not traditional net metering, it may be net billing or some other kind of distributed generation compensation tariff. The one exception here is South Dakota. South Dakota never did that shift. It never actually implemented net metering. Its other rules are actually just PURPA rules, which is pretty unique. And then finally, I wanted to show you guys a map of community solar rules, because community solar, oftentimes, a lot of states are implementing adders or benefits from their programs, encouraging brownfield or landfill development for community solar. I know, off my top of my head, I know for a fact that Connecticut has an adder for brownfield and landfills for its community solar program. So around a little under half the states now have community solar programs in place or ordered. North Carolina's had one in place since 2017. New Jersey's had a pilot that started in 2018 and then actually became permanent just last year in 2024. And they completely revised the program to be specifically low income focused based on the feedback that they got during the pilot program. We actually saw a lot of community solar changes over the past year. So not just in New Jersey, but New Mexico launched its program last year. Arizona had ordered its regulatory commission to develop rules for a program. Colorado also, like New Jersey, implemented new rules for a low-income focused program. Alaska passed a bill to create a new program. So it's becoming a lot more popular as time goes on. So that was a lot of information. Let me know if you guys have any questions, but I'm going to turn it back to Elise to talk a little bit more about Brownfields and landfill specifically.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Yeah, thanks, Rebekah, for taking us deeper into renewable energy today, which really provides the necessary information to fully understand our webinar topic. So we have the Brownfields information, we have the renewable energy information, Now let's combine those two ideas with the proposal of redeveloping brownfields with renewable energy. By converting brownfields into renewable energy assets, municipalities can achieve multiple goals, like reducing environmental hazard, generating local economic benefits, and also contributing to statewide and national renewable energy targets. This includes the US EPA's Repowering America's Land initiative. We're going to dive deeper into the benefits in just a moment, but first let's discuss the repowering program. So EPA's Repowering America's Land initiative is based in the EPA's Office of Land and Emergency Management, and it serves as a resource to provide educational programs to ensure that stakeholders get answers to the questions that they have about their projects. This program also tracks completed renewable projects around the country, and there's more than 500 successful projects. Several states have longstanding incentives and other programs to expand the number of renewable energy projects on contaminated land. These are organized programs that include financial incentives, procurement preferences, streamlined permitting, interagency coordination, and other activities. Federal incentive programs include the recently new tax credit bonus, the Energy Communities Tax Credit Bonus for brownfields. So as you study this infographic a bit more, because there's a lot on it, you can see that there's a lot of advantages to repowering projects. These include the potential to leverage existing infrastructure, the ability to reduce project cycle times through streamlined permitting and zoning, improvement of project economics with reduced land costs and tax incentives, the opportunity to gain community support through land revitalization efforts, and also the power to protect open space. So the path to developing renewable energy on contaminated sites is generally split into three phases. This is pre-screening, site conditions and feasibility, and design and development. And the steps after design and development include construction, operations, decommissioning of a renewable energy project. But to learn more about the steps involved and the information that you need to kind of begin these projects and move forward with them, the EPA has created a Brownfields renewable energy siting checklist. And this provides a flexible guide for integrating renewable energy activities into the Brownfields assessment, cleanup, and also reuse process. I've included a link at the right side of your screen that leads you to that checklist, as well as a screenshot of what the checklist looks like. And it really does walk you through all the steps. And I believe Fatima put this in the chat already, but we will make these slides available at the end. So the benefits of renewable energy on brownfields, as demonstrated by the EPA's Repowering Benefits Mapper and Matrix, can be grouped into economic benefits, environmental benefits, as well as community benefits. So the development of renewable energy on brownfields can result in job creation, including short-term job creation, such as construction workers who do the installation, as well as long-term job creation, such as the workers that are performing ongoing maintenance for the installation. So I looked at the EPA Repowering Benefits Matrix site list, and on there is just kind of an Excel spreadsheet that lists all these projects, but also it gives so much information about it. What kind of renewable energy it's using, the site size, where the site is located, and then what kind of benefits the site provides. So I just took some examples for each of these benefits, and this one here is a site in Bakersfield, California. The project over its 20-year lifespan is expected to generate approximately 1,300 full-time equivalent employee years. And of course, we all know that renewable energy is safer, healthier alternative energy source for the environment. Environmental benefits include, for example, reducing greenhouse gases by switching from dependence on fossil fuels to renewable energy. Also creating and maintaining pollinator-friendly habitat and protecting open space. Already 8 states have enacted legislation to promote pollinator-friendly solar development: Illinois, Maryland, Michigan, Minnesota, Missouri, New York, South Carolina, and Vermont. So while the details vary from state to state, the basic requirements are similar, following well-established principles for habitat that will attract and support bees, butterflies, and other pollinating insects. According to a 2019 article, Renewable Energy Has Space to Grow, researchers found that the total renewable energy potential of the world's converted land, or already developed land, which includes brownfields, is 17 times that required to meet the nationally determined contributions that are committed to during the 21st Conference of the Parties in Paris in 2015. And I have some examples as well from the Benefits Matrix site list. As of October 2020, the installation had produced enough electricity to equal planting over 67,000 trees equivalent to over 290,000 gallons of gas and over 230,000 pounds of methane. And then in Oakland, Maine, we have this solar farm also houses a beautiful, sorry, I just added beautiful, I was just picturing that, but a butterfly feeding ground. And revenue includes three categories. This is taxes or payment in lieu of taxes, also known as pilot, leases or renewable energy certificates, also known as renewable energy credits, or RECs, not to be confused with recognized environmental conditions. These are different REC. Pilots are alternative revenue stream structures that provide municipalities with stable income over the life of the agreement. Later in this webinar, I'm going to go into a success story with an established pilot program. A REC is a market-based instrument that represents the property rights to the environmental, social, and other non-power attributes of renewable electricity generation. So RECs are issued when 1 megawatt hour of electricity is generated and delivered to the electricity grid from a renewable energy resource. On a shared grid, RECs are the instrument that electricity consumers must use to substantiate renewable energy claims. Oh, and just to go on that example, this solar array generates revenue for the city from pilot and lease payments, as well as energy credits, which is expected to total nearly $4 million over the next 4 years. And then energy cost savings include benefits that reduce or offset the cost of electricity. So some examples here, the system reduces the $250,000 annual electric bill for cleanup by 90%. And then another one, over 100 Beverly residents have subscribed to the community solar system. Subscribers accrue energy credits that reduce their electricity bill. All right, so the benefits of renewable energy on brownfields for community benefits. These include community solar installations that allow community members to purchase solar power subscriptions, providing an environmentally friendly power source to those who otherwise might not have access, as well as cost savings for low to moderate income families. So we see some examples that I took from news articles that are fairly recent about things like this. And then the examples, this community solar model allows those who are not able to install solar to access solar energy. The town signed a power purchase agreement, or PPA, which provides energy cost savings. And then in Colorado, this project is part of a statewide initiative to demonstrate how low-income community solar can help reduce energy costs for the highest need customers. For example, those who spend 4% of income or more on utility bills. Now here we go to the other benefits. So this is the last of the group of benefits that are on the matrix list. Other benefits include cost savings associated with powering site cleanup, also known as green remediation. This is a practice that reduces the environmental impact of cleaning up hazardous substances on a site. Induced economic benefits to the community resulting from jobs created. So, for example, maybe more customers at your local diner. Secondary use of renewable energy installations as tools for learning and data gathering, and then the ability to use renewable energy installations for distributed generation. And just a quick example here is the solar array generates clean power to offset the needs of the remediation systems. So with that, I'd like to hand it over to Neil Alexander, partner at Cuddy and Feder LLP, to speak more about the compliance and legal side of renewable energy on brownfields.
Great, thank you so much. Good morning to everybody. So yes, as Elise said, my name is Neil Alexander. I'm a partner at Cuddy and Feder. I chair our environmental and energy practice group, and I spend a lot of time during my day permitting community solar, other renewable projects. So I'm glad to be able to be with you this morning. Just a quick backup or underscoring of some of the aspects of what Elise was saying is that when you get into permitting for a renewable facility, specifically, solar, what are the comparables? When you think about what you have to talk about, if you're coming in for a subdivision, you're coming in for a new manufacturing facility. In contrast, your solar farm, there's no water use, there's no wastewater, minimal traffic really once the site's built, maybe a monthly, site visit. A lot of it's 24/7 monitored. There's no noise, there's no night lighting, there's no school children. Your visual impact, once you've cleared the area, federal law requires a 7-foot security fence. So you have a fence, it may be, an attractive fence, it may have landscaping in front of it. So there are very few impacts, when you think about your environmental impact review under your state law or if you're looking at a utility scale project where you're looking to get a certificate of need from the Department of Public Utilities for your state. In New York, where I do a lot of my practicing, as well as Connecticut, but in New York in particular, New York has set through the Climate Leadership and Community Protection Act that was adopted in 2019, extremely aggressive goals, arguably the most aggressive goals to fight climate change and put the state on a path to zero emissions. So some of the things they've tried to do is they want to deploy 6,000 megawatts of solar by 2025. They actually hit that last year in 2024. They want to deploy, originally it was going to be 3,000 megawatts of battery energy storage. That's been, by 2030, that's been up to 6,000 megawatts. And the real goals here long term here are to get to 70% of all electricity being generated from renewable energy by 2030, and at 100%, this ties back to what Rebekah was saying, 100% of the clean carbon-free electricity by 2040. So you have these really aggressive goals that you're trying to meet, and the renewables are a way to do that. And that obviously is the notion that there'll be great environmental benefits by reducing our greenhouse gases. And then for those who are on the webinar who are from states that may not have as aggressive standards, very often most states are involved in some kind of regional greenhouse gas initiative that has targets, as Rebekah was pointing out. More locally, most community solar programs reduce the energy cost by about 10%. That's sort of a promise savings for joining it. So another reason why communities would want to see it, or why regulators should be, looking towards ways to approve these types of projects. They have few environmental impacts. They obviously help the state and the region meet their climate goals. And then really on where the voter is, you have a situation where you're reducing the cost for the consumer. So that's solar and renewable in general. When you start putting them on landfills or on brownfields, some of the things that really also, make it really something that we should be pursuing and something that should be easy to approve is you're usually working within a disturbed site. And you're usually working within a limit of disturbance that exists. So your amount of new disturbance is extremely limited. You're also taking, in many cases of a landfill, if you look at the second bullet, you're converting something that's closed, it's not productive, it's not generating revenue. And as Elise was pointing out with some of her examples, if you're a governmental entity and you're taking your municipal or regional solid waste facility that's been closed, now you have the opportunity to receive lease payments. You also have the opportunity to be an off-taker of the energy that's being directed, being generated, and thereby reduce your costs, as a landlord as part of your negotiation. Also, very often for the solar developer, what's exciting about it as well is that a lot of closed landfills in particular have methane offtakes, or they have, or the landfill or the brownfield, especially if it's a brownfield, the result of industrial operation, usually has really good grid connections right nearby. So you probably have phase 3 electric already there. You don't have a huge interconnection or seizure cost coming at you just to get your system online as the solar developer, where all of a sudden you have to, redo power lines and other infrastructure. I think Elise did a great job of already covering, so I'm going to skip over the Repowering America's Lands. But again, these are other resources available and reasons to pursue it. So, and I think we hit a lot of this slide already. I apologize. So I'm going to jump right through this one. And I think the one thing I also want to underscore is that, it becomes very easy when you're in permitting. People will try and find reasons why they don't like your project, or they'll try and point to a impact or a effect or an effect from your project. And what's really important is you have to always remember compared to what. So if you're bringing forward solar in order to meet the grid's needs, in order to, we have electric cars. Most multifamily that's being built now is being built all electric, particularly in New York under NYSERDA's guidance, and certainly all affordable and supportive housing is being built all electric. We have school districts that have mandates now to have electric buses, which are going to be charging at night. So we need a lot of electricity. So part of what your solar is doing is not only is it reducing your greenhouses, but it's meeting that need. And then if it isn't there to meet it, how are we going to meet it? We're going to meet it using incumbent technologies, which are fossil fuels, which usually involve air and water discharges and regular fuel deliveries. So it's sort of your solar is no emissions, but then if you stay with your fossil fuel and your existing technologies, you have a lot of emissions. So, it's so solar is a benefit and the other is a burden. So other reasons to get behind it. And then just a quick note in the New York region. So the most recent New York ISO, which is the grid, reliability needs assessment study came out at the end of last year. And basically it's saying that the bulk power transmission system isn't going to be able to serve the forecasted demand under normal weather conditions beginning in the summer of 2033, which is a pretty scary prospect. A prior study that they had issued had said that basically by the summer of 2025, New York, when it goes over the greater New York metro, when it goes over 95 degrees and 98 degrees is going to be short electricity and should expect to experience rolling brownouts, if not some blackouts, particularly if you have days over 100 degrees. Again, so all the more reason why we should be heading towards permitting these facilities as quickly as possible. Indeed, the New York State DEC did an analysis between 2016 and 2018. They reviewed 32 projects involving less than 25 acres across the whole state, and they were able to find all these through what New York State has something called the Environmental Notice Bulletin, which is required to publish decisions pursuant to the State Environmental Quality Review Act, which is necessary in order to compliance with that act is necessary in order to obtain land use permits, whether it's your variances or site plan, your special permit. And as this slide that's been up probably a little too long has said, they found 32 projects. All of them were determined to obtain what's called a negative declaration, which is no significant adverse impacts associated with the project. This is similar to those of you who are familiar with NEPA as a FONSI, a finding of no significant impact. So what basically that led the state of New York in 2018 when it made some changes to the environmental review process with its regulations. They created new exemptions from the State Environmental Quality Review Act for installing solar on 25 acres or less at closed landfills, at brownfields, on parking lots, at wastewater facilities, and industrial zoned and underutilized sites. And they actually also created a sort of a piggyback for the utility upgrades associated with that being exempt. And I'm going to jump in just really quickly ahead of you, Elise, apologizing for that, to say that there's been a lot of success in doing landfill solar in New York. Just two quick examples here, as the slide is saying. This is on out on Long Island in Brookhaven. It's 8.6 megawatts. You think about most of your community solar is about 5 megawatts. So this is a bigger project, and it's going into Long Island grid. Smaller, more municipal scales facilities have been around for, gosh, I think almost a decade. I can think of ones in Paterson, New York. And then just to say how, people are getting creative about brownfields and landfills, but also there is a project being built up in Cohoes, New York, near the Albany area, and it's floating solar on the water reservoir for the municipality. And we're actually working on a similar project right now in the city of Peekskill for a solar developer. So I think there's a lot of opportunity for this. I think it's a lot of great land. I think for municipalities, it's a great opportunity to obtain revenue. and create economic activity in their communities. For solar developers, not only are you able to take advantage of the investment tax credits and the state tax credits that exist in places like New York, but the Brownfield tax credit program in New York is obviously really helpful. I mean, I'd have to say I've been involved with about 3,000 units of multifamily in the past 6 years in the city of White Plains alone. And most of that multifamily nowadays is trying to add on, because of the cost of construction and inflation, use of the Brownfield tax credit program. And they're obviously, in those situations, they're cleaning up either to an unrestricted or a restricted residential standard, but there's still plenty of tax credits in the New York Brownfield tax credit program if you clean up to the commercial or industrial standards, unlike, as Elise was sort of alluding to, and in some other states that have fewer standards. In New York, you have 4 different levels of cleanup that can occur. And I think that's what I would encourage everybody to do, who's on the call, is whether you're a municipality, a county government, it's not, you don't have to make a finding that the land is no longer usable and you're selling it off. You're basically adding a use and an activity that can generate revenue. And there's fortunately now a track record of success that you can call upon. So thank you. And back to, I think, Elise at this point.
Great. Thank you so much, Neil. I'm going to get control of the slides. Perfect. Awesome. I don't know if everyone knows this, but Zoom webinars, you now can control the slides even if you're not sharing your screen. I thought that was the coolest thing ever. There are a few more case studies, Neil, in your slides. I don't know if you want to discuss them or just have them up there in the slides for other people to see as you go on. But I can also just move into my case study as well.
Why don't you go into your case study
Okay.
and I think you did a great job of letting everybody know who's attending that, that the slide deck will be available if they're looking for
Yeah,
further
absolutely.
examples. But
yeah,
thank you.
it's always, encouraging and motivating to see those. So feel free to look at the slides and review them on your own time. But now we're going to move on to a rewarding redevelopment, as I like to say. But first, I just want to say thank you, Neil, for the insight as well as the advice that you can share with us through experience, and the information that you can share also for the different stakeholders involved in projects like these. And I'm sure we have different people, different experience, different positions on this webinar today. So on the topic of that redevelopment example that you discussed, I'm going to discuss a rewarding redevelopment in Niagara, New York. So the Pine Avenue landfill was first utilized in the late 1800s when Union Carbide began using the site for the dumping of industrial manufacturing waste. It transitioned into a solid waste management facility in the 1970s, around the time that Republic Services Allied Waste took over the property as owner. The site is part of a larger 385-acre complex, including an active solid waste landfill, 7 closed solid waste landfills, and 6 closed hazardous waste landfills. So here we have a picture of the large site from 1995, and this picture is from Google Earth. And then in 2022, AC Power, which is a woman-owned brownfield solar developer based in New York, began a communication with Republic Services to transform closed portions of the landfill. With their experience and expertise of repurposing contaminated sites, they identified the opportunity to turn this challenging site into a productive asset that would generate renewable energy for the community as well as deliver economic benefits. So as part of a larger complex with some active and some closed landfills, the site presented unique permitting, environmental, as well as engineering challenges, such as securing access for the installation and operation of the solar facilities, ongoing landfill gas collection and monitoring, and interconnection design and siting of electrical equipment that's on and off the landfill cap. AC Power initiated a Phase 1 environmental site assessment, or Phase 1 ESA, and critical issues analysis and permitting matrix. And then from there, developers proposed 2 5-megawatt alternating current solar energy generating facilities on 2 separate sections of capped and closed landfills. The developers worked with outside land use council, as well as the town of Niagara to secure the appropriate documents. A consultant was engaged to provide the work needed for the NYS DEC post-closure use modification application. NYSDC is New York State Department of Environmental Conservation. And more important, though, was the fact that some of the site remained active. The presence of active gas flares, groundwater monitoring wells, and at-grade gas lines required the developers to work diligently to obtain all the required permits and approvals. And then AC Power sold the project to Calibrant Energy in 2023, and the benefits followed. So I'm going to go a little bit more in depth onto the benefits. The developers leveraged local and federal clean energy incentives. The Inflation Reduction Act's provisions, which include a base investment tax credit, of 30% for solar projects sited on brownfields, were really pivotal in financing the project. And additionally, the site's classification as an energy community in May 2024, based on updated employment codes and regional unemployment data, enabled this project to access an additional 10% investment tax credits. The project also highlights how these projects can benefit local workforces, as fair-paying jobs were provided during the construction phase under the Inflation Reduction Act's prevailing wage requirements. The jobs not only supported the solar industry, but they also contributed to skill development in clean energy construction, which therefore fostered a workforce that's prepared for future renewable energy projects. The resulting project will bring renewable discounted energy to more than 2,300 homes, allowing this community to directly share in the benefits of a decarbonized economy. And more than half of the project subscribers will be low to moderate income. The project's combined 12.5 megawatt direct current capacity translates to approximately 3,630 annual metric tons of carbon dioxide offset. This is equivalent to removing 789 cars from the road each year or planting 93,000 trees. And these impacts directly support New York State's renewable energy targets as well. AC Power and outside counsel worked with the town to implement a payment in lieu of taxes or pilot agreement, as we discussed earlier. The pilot agreement for this site established an annual payment structure that will pay out more than $500,000 to the town of Niagara and the Wheatfield School District over the next 15 years, which can be reinvested into community infrastructure or services. This arrangement ensures a predictable revenue stream for the town and school district and contributes to local services without increasing tax burdens on residents. Additionally, Niagara County recently introduced a local ordinance requiring solar developers to have an end-of-life recycling plan for their projects. So this means that Calibrant, the long-term owner and operator of the project, is going to work with the town to keep the panels from ending up in just another landfill at the end of its life cycle, which is as soon as 25 to 30 years. So I know it's a lot of information, and I believe that we have someone from Niagara in chat if they wanted to say anything more about this. But as we can see with that example success story in the town of Niagara, there's a lot of hurdles to jump, a lot of steps to take, and a lot of things to remember, but also a lot of benefits to reap. People like Rebekah at the North Carolina Clean Energy Technology Center or Neil with Cuddy and Feder LLP are just some of many resources that are available to help and assist you with all of that. And additionally, NJIT Tab is here to help as well. So, New Jersey Institute of Technology's Technical Assistance to Brownfield Communities program provides free technical assistance to state, regional, county, tribal, and local government entities, as well as nonprofit organizations that are interested in learning about, identifying, assessing, cleaning up, and redeveloping brownfield sites in EPA Regions 2 and 4. We provide assistance in three main ways, the first of which is our Brownfields Academy, which is available on our website at njit.edu/tab. And there you can find recordings of past webinars like this one, how-to videos, news, upcoming events, as well as resources like funding sources, federal and state contacts, and the list goes on. We also do community engagement and educational forums like this webinar, other events and workshops like summits, Brownfield 101 or Brownfield Basics, as we like to call them, grant writing workshops, inventories, and so much more. And finally, we have our one-on-one assistance, which I really think is our main bread and butter. So that includes answering your questions, whether that's you call us up once and we don't hear from you again, that's totally fine. If you want to meet monthly to discuss your projects or where you'd like to move forward, that works as well. Reviewing grant applications is another example, helping with brownfield inventories and prioritization, explaining cleanup technologies, creating roadmaps, reviewing environmental site assessments, and more. And with that, that is the end of our webinar. Here's all of our contact information. Take a picture of this, write it down. Again, these slides will be made available for everyone. But now we have time for Q&A. So if anyone has any questions at all, let me see. So I do have a question. Is Neil a resource with NJIT or only privately? Neil, would you like to go ahead and answer that?
So that's a great question. I'm not part of NJIT, but I always can make time for a call and start helping. And then if it goes somewhere, it goes somewhere. And if it doesn't, it doesn't. Please don't hesitate to make that phone call.
Absolutely. And again, I hope that another thing that you took away from this is not just the potential of renewable energy on brownfields, but also, how many people and organizations and companies are out there to kind of help guide you through this process. So you don't have to be alone. You can ask questions, you can give people calls like Neil and stuff like that. Let's see. Another question for Neil, popular guy. Neil, on average, how many megawatts can you get from 1 acre?
Good question. So, sort of almost like Moore's law, not to be too jocular about it, the industry is getting more and more efficient as time goes by. So, it used to be you would need 4 to 5 acres. I think there's driving down on that. I also, without getting like overly wonky here and outside of my technical expertise, a lot of places also are, and a lot of solar developers are adding battery storage, which makes the site more effective for them. So they can sell back into the grid when the cost is the highest and the grid needs it the most. So the economics on this make it such that, you sort of balance a little bit of battery storage. So it's not just how many panels, but it's really overall, not just, sorry, let me take that again. It's not just the power you generate as a top line number. It's when you're generating it and what your revenue stream can be. But 5 acres, 4 acres per megawatt is a good back of envelope starting point.
And Neil, don't mute just yet. You've got another question for you. Rebekah and I are just kind of hanging out, but Neil, have you worked on brownfields in New York City for redevelopment or the redeveloping initiative?
Yeah, I've worked on brownfields in New York City, and on several of them, and other types of cleanups, not only in the brownfield cleanup program. I have not done a solar. I'm looking at the question now from Vincent, because it popped up as well. I haven't worked on a solar project on a brownfield in New York City yet. I think part of that, candidly, is in New York City, obviously land scarcity, but also cost of land. So you've seen most of the projects of scale on rooftops, on warehouses and things of that sort. But I believe Fresh Kills on Staten Island has solar on it. But I think that was municipally done. I think I have Vincent's question. Let me just read that again and see if I can answer that as well. Or maybe Elise, you should say it out loud.
Sure, yeah, I can read it out loud. Neil, also on average, how much revenue can a municipality expect from a landfill lease for a solar project? Again, best guess.
I'm going to sound like such a lawyer. It depends. But and the reason why I'll say that is a lot of this is based on the incentives and what utility you're working with and what state you're working with, more so than even the solar developer, him or herself. So what that gets into is, at least in New York, to get very, in the weeds, there are different tranches of incentives, and the incentives diminish as more solar comes online in an area. So obviously the incentives are the strongest. It's also location based to where you have population. So the incentives you would get, let's say, in a Con Edison or a PSEG Long Island, with obviously, almost $10 million people rather in each of those capture areas, is going to be very different than what you may get in central with a utility company in central New York. Or I'll give you a quick anecdote. I did 2 projects in Dutchess County, community solar, with the same solar developer 2 years apart. And the towns were 2 towns apart, and the incentives were different because one was very, very early, and one was really sort of in the midst of a small boom in solar being developed. And so as a result of that, two things: one, the lease payment was affected, and two, the pilot was affected as well. So it gets wonky, but I've seen leases for community solar at $500,000 a year for 20 years plus in the Con Ed territory be offered.
Yeah, and kind of going off of what Neil just said about the incentives, if you remember my compensation map, it differs across each state. And so ignoring all of the incentives, the baseline amount of money you can get for a solar system when you export electricity to the grid is going to vary depending on your utility and the state that you're in and the general electricity costs within that state. Because a lot of times, if it's not like a one-to-one rate where you're getting paid exactly, the rate is the same as what you pay the utility, it's usually based on the avoided cost rate. The avoided cost rate is essentially the rate the utility would have paid, or the amount of money the utility would have had to dole out and use to build generation were it not for this distributed generation. And so you'll actually see that. I remember we were talking about this yesterday. For example, in California has really, really high electricity rates, just baseline. But in return, that means that the avoided cost rate in and of itself is also really, really high. So you can get a good rate of return on a distributed generation system, even though they've, let's say, deproved instead of improved their new net metering rules. So it really just depends.
Thank you. We have a question in chat. If a community had a brownfield and wanted to explore if their site is suitable for solar energy, what's the best place to start?
I'm going to guess it's NJIT tab.
Yeah, that's a great resource. I'm a little biased, but yeah, that's definitely an option. I was also going to say, I actually linked this and had a slide on it before, but the EPA's Repowering America's Land initiative, the checklist. So there's a siting checklist, and there's a link on one of the slides as well as a little screenshot of what it looks like. And on top of that, there's also a mapper, and it kind of shows you possible sites, potential sites for renewable energy on brownfields. So I'm actually going to send those links in the chat again, just in case anyone would like them. But those are good places to start. And then if you need help getting started, or, the next few steps, or all the way till the end, we're here to help.
Yeah, and then I will also say, so like I mentioned before, so NJIT is on the tab, NC is on the TAP, which is the Technical Assistance Partnership, and that specializes in on-site generation mainly for commercial and industrial customers and manufacturers. So, and like the tab, it's regionally based, so like we are specialized in the Southeast region specifically. But that's another thing that we can help with is, and like the tab, it's free technical assistance because it's based on federal funding. So you can come to us, or you can come to whichever university is associated with your region. You can get that technical assistance, particularly if you're part of that commercial industrial sector.
Nice. We love hearing about resources.
I think the only other thing I can add on is if the person who asked the question is in New York also has something called the Brownfield Opportunity Area Grants, which we can seek through the Department of State. So if it's a larger, broader brownfield area, you can get a grant to sort of study and do the planning and work with NJIT tab first, and then you can get into your site specific analyses and get some monies that way to even also maybe do your own phase 1 or a phase 2. And so that way, when you go out to an RFP for someone who actually is going to build it, you have data for them as to what, whether it's soil, groundwater, soil vapor, what are the contaminants, and they can start designing the anchoring system for the solar panels accordingly, especially if it's a brownfield that hasn't been cleaned up.
Right. Yeah. All right, if there are no more questions, Fatima is going to discuss some upcoming events that we have. If you'd like to stay tuned with NJIT Tabs events. We also understand that some of you have given up some of your lunchtime. So if you do need to leave, not a problem at all. We're actually just going to go back into upcoming events and then we'll end the webinar shortly after that. But for those who are hopping off, thank you so much for attending. I hope you learned a lot today from myself, Neil, Rebekah, and our team. And feel free to reach out to any of us at any time. And with that, I'll hand it over to Fatima.
All right. Well, the first, along with the summit, we're also going to, starting in February, we're going to start our new, kind of similar to webinar, but we're changing it up a little bit with our Tab Talks. This will consist of conversations among us and a group of special collaborators. We're hoping to have it once a month. While we're sure you're all excited to learn more about brownfield redevelopment, we're also looking to delve deeper into more of the various areas in which our work intersects, hopefully breaking down some of the silos of real projects to make it easier for those pursuing remediation and redevelopment. We've got a great slate of talks, including understanding your Phase 1 ESA reports, highlighting nonprofits, brownfields on Main Street, history of brownfields, exploring the green economy and the new jobs it creates, and more. So stay tuned for dates and times via our email or LinkedIn. If you're interested in joining the conversation, let us know as well. I did share our contact information in the chat. That'll also be included when we share the presentation along with resource links and contact information. So if you're interested in also being part of that conversation as one of our special conversation guest collaborators. I don't keep wanting to say dialogue. It is a dialogue. We want to be able to make it a mingling of the minds. We'll go with that. So we hope you could join us for that. Thank you so much for joining us today. I truly appreciate, NJIT Tab, all of us appreciate you sharing your expertise with us today.
Yeah, thank you so much for having us. It was great to be here.
An absolute pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you, guys.